Hello, everybody. Thank you very much to Zara and to Katie for inviting me to speak today. And I also want to thank Amna Walayat for giving me the high resolution images that I'm using in the talk today and for having a chat with me about her paintings. And I'm so delighted that you're here with us today. I also want to make clear that the talk is based on my viewings of her paintings and my not interpretation, but the way I'm looking at them. I'm not presuming to speak for Amna when I'm discussing them. So as it says in the abstract, this presentation will discuss the political importance of images of the hunt in Mughal-era paintings and Amna Walayat's subversive reinterpretation of the theme in her 3 paintings of Queen Victoria featured in the exhibition Tigers and Dragons. I'll first discuss the importance of hunting imagery for the Mughal era and why the hunt was considered such a political endeavor. And I will then turn to Amna's work, juxtaposing it against the original Mughal-era paintings that have informed her imagery, showing, I hope, the timeless relationship between hunting, political power, and visual propaganda. Now, I'm sure I don't need to remind anyone in this room that when we are looking at a work that has been created, it has been created for a reason. Right, the image holds some importance to the person who's making it or to the person who's commissioned it. It's why it was chosen for depiction. So I want you to just keep that in mind as we're going through this. So when we see images of the hunt, which we see throughout history, they've been consciously picked for representation, from the cave paintings of Lascaux to images on Greek pottery, from Roman mosaics to scenes we see in the Umayyad desert palaces, and from medieval representations to Mughal paintings. And we also have the lovely tiger hunt of Rubens. When we see these, we see that the image of the hunt is one that's constantly associated with power, the power of humans over nature and the power of life and death. So bringing this now particularly to the Mughals, hunting was not only a princely courtly activity, but a symbolic act of royal authority. It was a way for the ruler to project strength and good governance. Hunting expeditions were a way for the emperors to survey the landscape and their kingdom. They were able to see and be seen outside the capital cities in this way. Such expeditions were a way for the wider populace to further visually engage with the ruler, from afar, of course, but still to have that visual connection. Furthermore, hunting was a way for emperors to display their ability to control nature, something which they were uniquely suited to do because of their innate royal nature. And in this painting, we see a royal procession. This is from the Windsor Padshahnameh, which is an illustrated history of the Emperor Shah Jahan's reign. The procession that we're seeing relates to a hunt taking place in the background with many of the figures. It's a bit blurry, but I really had to zoom in to get to these details. Many of the figures are wearing camouflage, and we can see a cheetah just here, an actual person on a horseback doing some kind of hunting activity there, and other individuals who are partaking of the hunt as well. As discussed by the Mughal historian Shah Parpia, the idea of controlling or reordering nature was an integral part of the hunting process for the Mughal emperors, which had a wider impact on shaping the political, social, and cultural life of the Mughals. The notion of reordering nature was only possible because of the political power, capital, and wealth of the emperor. It was due to their strength, will, and might that the landscapes were transformed, and game was moved into more conducive locales for hunting, all of which, as Parpia writes, carried imposing political messages of power and prestige. The link between portraying political power through the act of transforming landscapes into hunting grounds was very stark. Wilderness that was selected as the site for a shikargah, an imperial hunting ground, underwent at times quite drastic alterations. These included, and here I'm quoting Parpia, deforestation and or reforestation, and the building of infrastructure such as pavilions, palaces, formal gardens, lakes, and reservoirs in order to develop the land into a favored hunting ground. And these undertakings would have been watched by tens of thousands of soldiers, courtiers, staff, and servants, presenting an image of imperial power and enhanced the emperor's carefully cultivated public persona of authority. In addition, we also have the symbolic potency of the financial relevance of these kind of acts taking place as well, because it was only the emperor who had enough wealth to carry out the extensive adjustments to the landscape which were necessary to transform nature to his will. And probably one of the most famous examples of this type of landscape alteration was the Emperor Jahangir's construction of Sheikhupura, a hunting ground in the province of Lahore. In 1607, Jahangir ordered the construction of a hunting tower, which you see on the left-hand side there, the Hiran Minar, which was built to commemorate his favorite pet antelope that he used in hunts, as well as an artificial tank with a baradari, which is that octagonal pavilion you see in the picture on the right. So an artificial tank with the baradari in the center of it, the associated village, and a fort. And this was all ordered to be built within an established imperial hunting ground, completely transforming it and the surrounding topography. And only once the work was all carried out did Jahangir consider the site a true royal hunting ground. Furthermore, there's a strong association between hunting expeditions and military excursions and drills. And this was especially true in the early years of the empire and later during periods of political turmoil. Then, hunting expeditions were used to undertake exploratory visits to areas of unrest, or which were potential sites of uprisings or rebellions. They also served as intimidation tactics in the same areas. In such instances, the Shikarga became a space for military training and war games. There were tactically organized hunting expeditions that became the best means of moving troops around the landscape without arousing suspicion. And spectacles, which might involve tens of thousands of soldiers in these hunting grounds, gave the emperor the opportunity to publicly display his ability to any adversaries, his ability to mobilize troops and resources, and to send overt signals to his enemies of his ability to counteract them, and to take them on in combat. So all of this is to stress that for the Mughal emperors, the act of the hunt had an inherently political role and had important layers of symbolism attached to it when these activities were undertaken. And this translated into the visual. And images of the hunt and scenes of hunting expeditions were chosen for representations in the great Mughal illustrated histories, including the Baburname, Akbarname, and Padshahname, and within Mughal albums as well. And through these visualizations of this potent political virile act, the glory of the rulers was again made manifest. Hunting imagery became an important genre of royal Mughal depictions, and we may judge the potency of its symbolic importance from the fact that such imagery was subsequently copied and mimicked by courts that both owed their allegiances to the Mughals and who were their rivals. These included the Rajasthani courts and those of the Deccan sultans. Now, prior to those courts being exposed to Mughal paintings of this particular genre of the hunt, hunting scenes had not been commissioned by those particular rulers. It was only after their imagery, the imagery of the hunt, had been created and established at the Mughal imperial ateliers that it spread to those of other courts. And even after Rajasthani courts began to pull away from the Mughal center and alliances with the courts of the Deccan faded, the iconography of rulership and power adopted from the imperial Mughal center remained, including imagery of the hunt. And here we have, a painting on the right-hand side from the Windsor Padshahname of Shah Jahan engaged in a lion hunt. And on the left-hand side, obviously quite different in style, but in terms of the imagery that we're seeing, it's one of the Rajas of Kota, again, undertaking a lion hunt. And here are some other examples of hunting portraits that were produced at some of the other Rajasthani courts as well. This wonderful portrait of Rao Umad Singh of Bundi killing a boar, and a Kota elephant hunt of a rhinoceros, but using an elephant. And the Bundi and Kota hunting scenes, which were produced by their artists, are some of just the most dynamic, interesting ones to see. And here we have another painting from a different Rajasthani court, the court of Mewar, that you see on the right-hand side, and on the left, a painting of a ruler hunting a tiger from the Deccan, which I want to focus in on just for a minute, and which you will see why in shortly. So in this painting of Sultan Ali Adil Shah II of Bijapur, one of the Deccan sultans, we have a portrait of him displaying his hunting prowess. So a portrait that was meant to show his strength, both his physical strength as well as his political strength. But in reality, the Sultan continuously had to contend with incursions into his territory by both the Mughals and the Marathas. And eventually he left the affairs of the state to his minister, so step back from that. And this fragmentary painting, you can see it's damaged around the edges, captures a moment which he chose to have represented, in which he is projecting himself as an ideal ruler, as a very strong, virile political ruler, which was not the actual state of affairs in real life. So we see him standing with the bow drawn back, getting ready to shoot a second arrow at a tiger, which is descending from quite a steep slope. Now, when Europeans entered the political sphere of South Asia, first as guests, then as military allies or foes, and ultimately with the East India Company and the British as ruling powers, hunting was a continued act of political strength and power. We can see that exemplified by these 2 pages from the Gentil album, an album of company paintings made for the French infantry colonel Jean-Baptiste Gentil, who served under Shuja-ud-Dawla of Awadh from 1762 to 1775. And these are images in his album from 2 hunts that Gentil took part in. The bottom one is an image of a hunt in the woods of Oud in 1769, at which Gentil was present, and it lasted for 10 days. Tiger, deer, rhinoceros, bear, black buck, lion, and wild buffalo are being hunted. And in the top image, which is the rhino and buffalo hunt in 1768, also in Oud, that was undertaken with a corps of 600 Frenchmen. And again, Gentil was present for that. And we are told in his notes that the Nawab of Oud killed 2 rhinoceros during that hunt. So we see this continued importance of the hunt as an act that is taking place at these courts, the importance of being invited along to these particular occasions, and the fact that we then have these charming but troubling at the same time scenes of the hunt taking place. Now, jumping ahead to Queen Victoria, she appears to have been into hunting as well as a royal pastime. She wrote about her hunting excursions in Scotland in her diary, and she made sketches, quite a lot of sketches as I discovered, of the many deer killed by her husband, Prince Albert, during hunting expeditions at Balmoral. And so from that, I would like to move then to Amna's paintings of Victoria. When I saw these works, I was immediately struck by the imagery which related the paintings to Mughal-era ones. And I looked at them, I was viewing them through this lens of the hunt and its representations and associations with political power. But in Amna's work, it's being done in quite a subversive way as I see it. Amna herself, in the creation of these paintings, was interested in presenting power struggles and the rule of the jungle. So the idea that the strongest wins. And of course, the iconography of the hunt is obviously very well suited to those particular themes. So let us examine her paintings alongside the Mughal-era ones they were based on, or that they drew inspiration from. And as we look at them, let's remember the relationship between hunting, political power, and visual propaganda. So in her painting of the Bengal tiger hunt, we see Queen Victoria standing, very beautifully dressed, with her bow drawn, about to shoot a second arrow at a Bengal tiger descending from quite a steep embankment. And I hope you will recognize that this is very much based upon the Deccan painting that we saw just a short while ago. And when I spoke to Amna, it was quite interesting because she very much stressed to me the fact that this is a Bengal tiger that she has painted, and it's a Bengal tiger cub. And this is because she wanted to create a visual association with the cub and Siraj-ud-Dawla, the young ruler of Bengal, who was defeated at the Battle of Plassey in 1757. And that was a obviously pivotal moment, giving the East India Company its first political and financial hold over a Mughal province. And it happened to be, one of the most financially rewarding of the provinces. So the potency of the image of the hunt still holds here. And it's tied into Amna's desire to portray power struggles and the rule that, might is right. The next painting is not so straightforward in terms of its Mughal sources. It doesn't have a single source, but a few. And in particular, I see it as an amalgamation of two key paintings of Jahangir's reign. So we see Victoria standing, holding the Kohinoor diamond in her hand. We have this incredible halo around her head. She's standing on an hourglass, which is resting on a globe. And at the base of the hourglass, we have this lion and antelope figure in a troubling pose. And I don't know if you can see it in this painting, but there is a ship as well represented in the bottom half of the hourglass. Now, my immediate visual reference was the very famous portrait of Jahangir preferring a Sufi sheikh to kings, in which we have Jahangir seated on an hourglass, just as Victoria stands on one. And we obviously see that incredible halo around his head. But there's also this allegorical painting of Jahangir embracing the Safavid ruler Shah Abbas, where we see the same halo around Victoria's head, so that sun in a crescent moon being held up by these two putti heads. We see Jahangir and Shah Abbas standing on the globe, and they are standing on a lion and a lamb, who are in a much more peaceful, contented pose than what we have Victoria standing upon. And hopefully I will have time to come back to that. The next painting, so all three of these are in the exhibition, of the tiger and dragon hunt of Victoria is really fascinating to me because it expresses for me this really kind of frenetic energy of these writhing figures all standing together, not standing together, all crumpled up together. And it is this, very kind of visceral attack against the tiger and the dragon. But we see the lion very prominently placed as well. And Amna told me that in putting this particular painting together, she was looking at multiple sources and using them to inform this particular work. And in images, the image of Victoria astride the lion comes from images of the Hindu goddess Durga, who rode a lion into battle as well. Now, very frustrating for me, there is a Rajput painting in my head, which so perfectly exemplifies and relates to this painting. And for the last week, I have not been able to find it. So it exists, but I have no idea where. So I am just showing some comparable Rajasthani images to kind of reinforce the idea that with this particular painting, the sources that Amna is pulling from are from hunting scenes which contain this kind of very frenetic energy. I come back to that term. So we have this one from the palace at Bundi. You can see the figure on the left drawing his bow and arrow as he rides on horseback, and the idea of twisting around to shoots at the back. We can see Victoria doing something similar here. That idea of these multiple figures kind of very much balled together and existing within a tight frame of depiction, we can see a resonance with this particular painting from Kota. And I just put in a picture of the goddess as well, here on a tiger rather than a lion, because sometimes we have them confused in the imagery, to show you some of the works that Amna had been looking at. Now, very quickly, if you'll permit me, because I know I'm running very short of time, I just wanted to come back to this particular aspect of Queen Victoria holding the Kohinoor diamond, because this is, I thought, one of the most interesting subversive ways of using this particular imagery in her paintings. And I just need to explain that this is because when we are looking in Mughal paintings, this idea of the lion and the lamb, or lion as a bull, or lion and a bull, it comes from imagery from the Polyglot Bible, which appeared at the Mughal court in 1570 during the first Jesuit mission to Akbar's court. And one of the frontispieces in that Polyglot Bible is what you see on the left-hand side, which is picturing a verse from the book of Isaiah. The Mughal artists looked at this. They took the idea of the lion, the bull, and other animals all living and coexisting very peacefully, and they adopted it, they adapted it, so that within their paintings, it's speaking to the perfect kingdom of Solomon. And part of the Mughals' imperial ideology was the idea that they were Solomonic kings, and their kingdom was a perfect kingdom like Solomon's kingdom. And I don't have time to go into kind of the ins and outs of that. I'm very happy to talk about it later with anyone. But from Jahangir's reign, we see the image of the lion and the lamb, or the lion and the bull, basically a predator and prey, lying together on the globe beneath the feet of Jahangir. In this instance, here beneath the feet of Shah Jahan, here sitting together in one of the audience scenes from the Windsor Padshah-Nameh. So it becomes a very popular way of representing this kind of perfect idea of Solomonic kingship for the Mughals. And so I found it completely fascinating that in this particular painting of Queen Victoria holding the Kohinoor, we have this twist to that imagery, where the lion has slaughtered the antelope, and we are looking at something which is speaking to the violence of empire, the violence of colonialism, because we have not only this representation, which is so prominently placed at the base of Victoria, but the ship, as we see within the hourglass, Amna told me, is to represent the slave ships. Obviously, the British were benefiting financially from at the time, and of course, she holds the Kohinoor. So we have this really fantastic representation of the violence of colonialism, but using subverted imagery from a Mughal context speaking to perfect kingship. And I know I've gone over time, so I'm going to end there. So thank you very much.